Hey there, welcome back to Brew Better. My name's Erik and I'm the head barista trainer at Rosso. And today I'd like to share with you my Brewers Cup recipe from the 2024 National Brewers Cup Championship. So before we get into the details, I'll walk you through the equipment that we'll be needing today. First off, kettle and at least 400 grams of water. And we'll be heating that water to 95 degrees Celsius or boiling. Grinding our coffee fresh, I'm using the Easypresso ZP6. And for competition, I ground my coffee at 3 on this grinder, but you want to use something on the finer side of medium with whatever grinder that you have. And I'll be using 18 grams of coffee that I've weighed out on my trusty Time More scale. And the most important thing is you'll need a brewer that has smooth walls on the inside and a very textured bottom. I use the Orea V4, but a cone style dripper like the Kono dripper, which also has smooth walls and a kind of textured bottom, will work just as well. And finally, you'll need a paper filter. So we'll be folding this paper filter, and there's this nifty tool from Orea that makes it a little bit easier. And now we want to use a filter without kind of a pleated sides like you have with the Kalita Wave flat bottom filter, because we want the filter to sit tightly against the side walls of the brewer. And this prevents water from flowing around the bed of coffee and instead biases it towards flowing only through it, which makes the extraction of your brew a little bit more even. You want to push it down very tightly into brewer. When I'm rinsing the filter, I am going to press it down a little bit with my fingers, pour in the center, try and set it really deep, and then up the side walls. Sometimes you need to continue to set the filter, pressing it down with your fingers or some other tool to get it to sit very tightly against that wall. And we can take that rinse water and throw it down the sink. Now it's time to grind our coffee. So I'm using our Sweet Tooth coffee, which is a single origin coffee from Guatemala. That the taste profile is in the name. It is a very sweet coffee. So the focus of this recipe is on maximizing the efficiency of the extraction. So I introduced the first part of that in being the shape of the brewer, having smooth walls and a textured bottom. And that ensures that water flows through the coffee bed instead of in pockets around the coffee on the edges of the brewer. But the textured bottom also acts as contact points between the filter and the brewer, which there's a hypothesis that those points are where the water is biased to flow. And having them collected on the bottom hopefully ensures that water flows through the bed instead of around it in the same way that the smooth walls contribute to that. This makes for a more direct contact between the water and the coffee, dissolving more from it per pour. All right, so now we can add our dose of coffee to the brewer. And we want to give it a good little shake to just make sure that the grounds are relatively flat and even. Then we'll tare our scale. We'll be pouring 4 identical pours of 50 grams up to a total of 200 grams. At the end of the brew, we'll be diluting with an additional portion of water to soften the intensity of this brew. And that's one of the pros of it, is that we have very direct control over the final concentration of the brew. So grab your kettle and start your timer just as you're about to start your first pour. And we're going to be pouring relatively slowly and in a circular motion. The slow pour minimizes agitation of the bed of coffee, while the circular motion makes sure that we are evenly saturating that bed of coffee. Both contribute to a longer contact time between the water and the grounds, pulling just a little bit more out of them. So after a minute, or at least 45 seconds for blooming your coffee, we'll begin our second addition of 50 grams. I'm doing the same pour that kind of spiral motion, just trying to pour slowly. And I'm just gonna wait until the water fully drains through the bed of coffee before starting my next pour. So at the end of this brew, we end up with a very concentrated coffee, which is usually not enjoyable on its own. When I was doing this recipe for Brewers Cup, I would calculate exactly how much I needed to dilute the brew by, based on the concentration of total dissolved solids, which is just the coffee flavor stuff within the water. Once we knew that number, we were able to calculate exactly how much water to dilute. Refractometers, the tools used to measure TDS, are quite expensive though, so you can also just go by taste. So I start out with a dilution of at least an additional 50 grams. And then I'll pour myself a little sip. Make sure you give it a good swirl each time you add water. So that's already tasting pretty good, but it feels a little heavy on my palate. So I'm gonna add some more water to dilute it. And you just wanna keep adding more water in increments of maybe 20 grams until you find a concentration that feels a little bit more open and expressive for the coffee. So I'll just have another little taste. And so that's a lot better. The tough thing is avoiding over diluting your brew. So that's why we want to move in small increments in this case. That's a little walkthrough of my recipe that I used for the 2024 Canadian National Brewers Cup Championship. Let me know how it works for yourself if you try it, and we'll see you next time on Brew Better.